From the injustice of Barb Holland to the heavy metal sacrifice of Eddie Munson, the Upside Down has taken no prisoners. We are tracking the total body count from Hawkins to Russia and back again. Here is every single death in Stranger Things. Let's rewind the tape to where it all began. Before the clock struck midnight and the gates fully opened, these were the losses that changed Hawkins. The first grisly moment set the tone of the whole series. In the hallway of Hawkins National Laboratory, a panicked scientist sprinted for the elevator, looked up, and vanished into the ceiling, torn away by a creature that did not belong in our world. That scientist's death is the opening sting, and it marks the first human loss to the Demogorgon as the lab's breach lets the Upside Down leak into Hawkins. Elsewhere in town, the pain already ran deep. Sarah Hopper's battle with cancer had ended before any of this began, a quiet loss that shaped every risky choice her father would later make. When government operatives hunted an escaped child with strange powers, a kind diner owner named Benny Hammond fed her, smiled, and covered for her meal. Minutes later, he lay dead on the floor, shot in the head by a federal fixer named Connie Frazier, as a cover-up tightened its grip on a town that still thought monsters belonged in bedtime stories. 2 lab agents who tried to seize that child, 11, were thrown by an invisible force and never got up again. Around them, older wounds surfaced. A suicide in town lived only in Hopper's memory, proof that Hawkins had ghosts long before it had gates. A missing girl, Barb Holland, climbed onto a diving board behind Steve Harrington's house, then slipped into the cold night and into the creature's world. Barb never came back. In the lab's flashbacks, 2 orderlies died violently, one with his back broken against concrete, the other with his neck snapped by a force that couldn't be seen, and newspaper clippings hinted at MK Ultra fatalities, unnamed subjects who never walked away from experiments that were never supposed to exist. A search team in hazmat suits found a tattered vest marked Shepherd, a reminder that a trained operative sent into the gate had been taken and killed. Town rumor filled in 2 names, Dale and Henry, residents who vanished and were later counted among the Demogorgon's victims. A rabbit died in the woods after Jonathan Byers fired a warning shot to scare off his father's tirade, the body a sharp little omen of what hunted in the trees. A wounded deer bled at the tree line, then was dragged into the dark and eaten. In the den beneath the library, a slick upside-down egg burst and was consumed by the predator that had made a nest of tunnels no one would want to search. On the road out of Hawkins, 11 flipped a pursuing van. The 2 agents inside did not survive their injuries from the crash. As the central gate pulsed red and the lab scrambled to maintain control, Hawkins kept counting. 2 more residents were later listed among the taken and killed, part of the 6 that Dr. Brenner grimly admitted had been snatched. In the school hallway, Connie Frazier's skull crushed under telekinetic pressure when she cornered the kids. 4 military police officers followed, their brains crushed the exact same way. Another lab employee fell with the same sudden, bone-deep crack. In the corridors, the Demogorgon ripped through a squad of soldiers, 4 of the veterans killed in a matter of seconds. It then found 2 more lab workers and tore them apart. Inside the upside-down version of the public library, vines twitched as Hopper fired bursts into living roots to clear a path. Moments later, in the gym, 11 faced the monster, disintegrated the Demogorgon, and vanished with it. 1 season in, Hawkins had already paid a high price in scientists, soldiers, neighbors, and a friend who never got to go home. The winter after that chaos brought a quieter grief. The Byers family dog, Chester, died between the 1st and 2nd seasons, a small loss that marked how the strange new normal kept wearing at the edges of ordinary life. When autumn returned, a flashback showed a squirrel hammered against a tree by an invisible shah, a snapshot of 11's feral, hungry months alone in the woods, where survival meant hard choices and a sickening carcass left behind. A cat named Muse became food for a growing creature that Dustin Henderson called D'Artagnan, one of many larvae tied to the tunnels hidden under town. In a memory from years earlier, Terry Ives pulled a trigger in a lab hallway, a guard crumpling from her shot, in a desperate attempt to reach the daughter she had been told was dead at birth. Then the lab fell to creatures. A team of scientists checked a tunnel camera, and dog-like Demogorgons rushed them in the dark. 7 died in an instant that blinked past on security feeds. In a split second from the past, Kaylee Prasad hunted and shot a former lab employee during a breathless revenge run that tried to even a score no one could really balance. When the tunnels finally surged into the facility, a technician went down in a smear of blood as demodogs poured through doors and vents. More techs died the same way, 5 bodies left where they fell. An MP tried to hold the line with a sidearm and was dragged off his feet. In grainy camera feeds and sprawled in corridors, 33 more employees were found dead, killed by the pack while Will Byers, possessed, involuntarily guided the swarm toward them. Then the show took one of its kindest figures. Bob Newby figured out the map on Will's walls, fixed a broken lock with a smile, and sprinted down a hallway with a grin that whispered, "Almost there." He was mauled and devoured before Joyce could save him. One demodog died as 11 seized its body telekinetically. Hopper took down at least a dozen with controlled bursts in the tunnels and in the lab, clearing a path where none existed minutes earlier. When the gate closed, D'Artagnan's mind went quiet, along with the rest of the pack. Dozens of demodogs collapsed in a chain reaction, their hive cut from its source as the breach sealed, and the red glow dimmed to nothing. The summer after was louder, brighter, and far more crowded. In a Russian facility trying to rip open space beneath a small American mall, a test fire went wrong. 7 scientists disintegrated in a blast when the prototype key chewed itself apart. One surviving scientist died later, choked by a brutal enforcer named Grigory, a man with a mission and a stare as sharp as a knife. On the surface, rats and Hawkins began to explode by the hundreds, bodies liquefying as the Mind Flayer used them as raw material. The count ran well into the hundreds and left kitchens, basements, and alleys spattered with proof that something sentient was gathering mass. A local man, Jack Driscoll, died of natural causes off-screen, but the rat his wife had trapped still joined the wave of small bodies bursting into sludge. By the time the thing built at the steel mill began to stir, the tally had climbed again. In the hospital's halls, 2 co-workers, Bruce Lowe and Tom Holloway, murdered a nurse, a visitor, and a patient while under the Mind Flayer's sway, then went hunting Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan Byers with a manic, grinning focus that made the hospital floors look like a maze. The fight that followed was ugly and close. Jonathan drove a blade into Tom's neck. Nancy bashed Bruce's face until bone gave way. Both bodies melted into sludge that crawled away to join the monster. On a different floor, Dr. Zharkov took a jolt from a taser during a desperate escape. Then later the flayed kept feeding the growing creature. Heather Holloway, Janet Holloway, and Doris Driscoll dissolved into wet, crawling matter to make the physical form of the Mind Flayer stronger. 2 men, David and Adam, followed. 2 more, Jack and Melissa, added their bodies to the mass. A newspaper article later implied 19 additional Hawkins residents also melted and joined the pile. Their disappearances flattened into a few lines about a mall fire that hid the truth in plain sight. Across town, the spy game turned kinetic. At Starcourt, Hopper shot 4 guards in the bowels of the base while Grigory kept closing in. In the parking lot fight that followed, 11 whipped a car into a squad of soldiers with a flick of her wrist. 4 of them died from their injuries, sprawled across asphalt and twisted metal. The 4th of July fair lit the night, and Alexei, the defector who loved Cherry, laughed with a stuffed prize in his hands, then collapsed with a hole in his chest after Grigory's bullet punched through him. In the final sprint, Hopper drove Grigory into the churning gears of the key. The machine ate him. Under the mall, 5 scientists died in the explosion when Joyce turned both keys and shut the portal. The spider monster, the fleshy giant made from the flayed, collapsed the second the gate closed, disconnected from the thing that gave it purpose. On the far side of the world in Kamchatka, a prisoner died in an iron and ice arena, ripped open by a captive demogorgon for the entertainment of guards who had seen too much. Then the monster turned on Billy Hargrove at the mall. It had controlled him, used him, and nearly made him a weapon that would have killed a child. He shook free long enough to shield 11. Tentacles pierced his sides and drove through his chest. Blood soaked his shirt. He died on the floor as fireworks cracked overhead and the mall burned from the inside out. When dawn arrived, Starcourt fell quiet, the lights went out, and the town began counting the missing. The next year looked different from every angle. A massacre in a lab flashed in fragments, then in full. Children with numbers died on the floor with bones broken and eyes ruined. Guards and orderlies twisted mid-stride, doors torn from hinges by invisible hands. In the reassembled truth, one, the orderly who had guided 11, snapped necks and crushed bodies, killing 6, Dr. Ellis, Alec, and 10, along with a long list of numbered kids, orderlies, and guards before turning on 11 and trying to finish the job. She turned it back on him and cast him through a tear in the wall, which made him something worse. Years later, in 1986, Hawkins felt the echo. A cheerleader named Chrissy Cunningham suffered waking nightmares, walked into Eddie Munson's trailer, and died, hovering in the air as her bones snapped and her eyes went blank. In the woods and on a lonely road, a haunted boy named Fred Benson crashed, crawled, and then rose into the same killing ritual that left him broken above the asphalt. In Russia, Jim Hopper took a guard's ankle cuffs and turned them into a garrote, killing the man who had been choking him in a workhouse covered in frost. A few hours later, 5 guards died in a blast when Hopper and the team turned a smuggled pack of explosives into an escape plan. In California, a federal shootout left agents dead on a living room floor while the kids tried to keep a target alive. Agent Harmon returned fire, bought a few seconds, and later died of his wounds while telling them to run. In a haunted memory from 1959, Henry Creel tore apart the family dog and small animals around the house, then murdered his mother Virginia and his sister Alice by breaking their bodies in midair. He showed his father the images later to twist guilt and grind the edges of memory. A caller mentioned a great uncle who never came home, one more absence buried in a family story. Back in 1986, a high school swimmer named Patrick McKinney rose and shattered above Lover's Lake. Another victim claimed midair by a predator that mocked its prey before the killing blow. Under the surface, fish stabbed on thorned vines and the upside down twitched and went still. More biomass feeding a nest that no one wanted to see with their own eyes. The prison in Kamchatka ran a spectacle for its guards. Prisoners were dragged into a stone arena and set against a Demogorgon. Oleg died fast, then 5 more prisoners were ripped apart in seconds. In that same complex, Demodogs were later found dead by the dozen, some shot by Hopper, others burned by Murray Bauman's flamethrower when the plan shifted from rescue to extermination. At least one Demodog went down to a clean headshot from Hopper in the smoke and snow. Back in Hawkins, a furious swarm of Demobats attacked the team in the Upside Down. Nancy Wheeler and Robin Buckley beat one to death with oars near the boat launch. Eddie Munson stabbed another as it swooped. Steve Harrington smashed one to the pavement and tore it in half with both hands. In the lab flashbacks, more names from security logs fell to one's rampage. Blackman and Thatcher slammed into walls on the floor, dead on impact. Another guard hit the ceiling and crumpled. Seeley died when his body met concrete. Miller's neck snapped in a blink. An unnamed child's bones and eyes were destroyed. 2 more guards died the same way. 4, another child with a number and a shaved head, rose and broke midair like glass with no sound. 2 more test subjects followed, and then another handful of orderlies and guards in a sequence that looked less like a fight and more like gravity changing its mind. In the Nevada desert, a helicopter gunner shot Martin Brenner in the back and chest. He bled out in the dust beneath a sky that had watched him turn children into case files. As soldiers pursued, 11 brought down the helicopter with a single look, and 2 who were inside did not walk away. At the Nina site, 6 guards and 11 scientists lay dead by the end of the attack, riddled by bullets until the facility went quiet. A moment later, with the desert suddenly still, the road back to Hawkins felt both closer and more dangerous. Then came the long night. In the tunnels beneath the Russian prison, a Demodog convulsed under a surge of electricity when Joyce jammed a taser into its hide. Murray swung a flamethrower around until the room blazed and fell silent, burning through cages packed with snarling demonic shapes. In the arena, Hopper lit a Demogorgon on fire, staggered it, then cut its head off with a sword as it lunged. The camera cut back to the Creel house, where a guitar solo bought time and a storm of leather-winged things turned and descended. Eddie Munson made a choice, lured the swarm and fought on his feet until the bites and slashes knocked him down and kept him there. Vecna's hold on Max Mayfield tightened as the clock tolled 4. Bones broke, eyes went blank. Her heart stopped. Moments later, 11 reached her mind and pulled her back. Max lived, barely, after reviving into a coma after flatlining. In the attic below, Jason Carver found the ritual in progress, struck Lucas Sinclair, and pulled a gun. When the final gate opened, the floor split between Jason's feet and the dimensional seam tore him in half. The 4 tiers met at the town center, and the ground convulsed like the lake had hours earlier. Radio chatter listed the earthquake's toll at 22 dead in Hawkins, Jason among them. Another was presumed to be Eddie, despite where he really fell. That left 20 unnamed residents lost to collapsing buildings, fires, and ruptured streets, the first casualties of an invasion that had only just begun. In the Russian complex, the mop-up turned grim. A warden named Melnikov died in the chaos, and nearly 30 more guards, prisoners, and scientists were listed among the bodies after the monsters broke loose and the fight lit the holdfast from wall to wall. When the night ended, burned Demodogs lay in piles, the decapitated Demogorgon curled in ash, and Demobats rained to the ground after their hive mind collapsed. The house on Moorhead buckled where it stood. The monitors beside Max's bed beeped into a new rhythm. The field behind Hopper's cabin darkened as tendrils from the other side began to invade the world above. Season by season, the record is brutal and precise, and it reaches into corners that many would never expect from its first few episodes. In the beginning, it took a lab scientist in an elevator, a mother lost to illness, a diner owner who showed kindness, a federal cleaner who thought she could control the damage, 2 agents tossed by a force they could not see, a bullied teen who went to a party and never came home, 2 orderlies the lab trained and used, faceless MK Ultra victims who faded into clippings, a field operative named Shepard, 2 residents taken in the night, an animal in the wrong place, a deer that fed a predator, an egg that did not hatch, a pair of men in a flipped van, a string of military police and lab staff crushed by invisible hands, soldiers and technicians ripped apart by a thing with too many teeth, a living vine in a library that bled like anything else, and the Demogorgon itself. In the second run, it added a family dog between seasons, a squirrel in a flashback, a cat in a kitchen, a guard in a hard, short memory of a woman reaching for her child, 7 scientists killed by demodogs, a former employee shot by Kali, a technician ambushed in the tunnels, 5 more techs and 1 MP dragged down, 33 employees seen dead across the lab, Bob Newby in a hallway inches from safety, a single demodog seizing under Eleven's power, a dozen more falling to Hopper's controlled bursts, D'Artagnan going still the instant the gate snapped shut, and more than 24 demodogs dying in the same heartbeat when the hive link failed. Then the summer gates opened, and the counters spun even faster. 7 Russian scientists died in a test blast, 1 more strangled by Grigori, 393 rats exploded across Hawkins, Jack Driscoll passed away off-screen while his household still fed the swarm. A nurse, a visitor, and a patient were murdered in the hospital. Bruce and Tom were killed in a fight, and then melted into the monster. Heather, Janet, and Doris joined the mass along with David, Adam, Jack, Melissa, and 19 more residents folded into a single body. 4 Russian soldiers died beneath a thrown car. Alexei was shot at the fair. Grigory died in the keys turning gears. Billy died under the spider monster's tentacles. 5 scientists were lost in the Starcourt explosion. The spider monster collapsed when the door closed, and a prisoner in Kamchatka fed a caged demogorgon that would not stay caged for long. The 4th chapter pulled the past into the present and doubled the cost. The massacre victims began with 6, Dr. Ellis, Alec, and 10. Then kept going through numbered children and uniformed staff as one walked a path of broken necks and shattered eyes. In Hawkins, Chrissy, Fred, and Patrick rose and broke, each death announcing Vecna's method in terrible detail. In California, agents fell in a living room and Agent Harmon died after buying his friends a minute. In Russia, a guard died at Hopper's hands and 5 guards died in an explosion. In old Creel memories, a family dog and small animals were killed. Then Virginia and Alice Creel died while the house stood still. A great-uncle's absence lingered like a held breath. In the Upside Down, fish skewered on vines fed a nest. In Kamchatka, Oleg and other prisoners died in an arena. Demodogs died by gunfire and fire, and a demogorgon died by flame and a sword. In the sky over Nevada, a helicopter fell, and its crew did not survive. At the Nina site, guards and scientists died under a barrage of bullets. Martin Brenner died with the sand soaking up the last of his power. Back in Hawkins, demobats died to oars, knives, and bare hands. A demodog died to a taser. Eddie Munson died on the street he refused to run from. Max Mayfield died and was pulled back. Jason Carver died along a fault line when the final gate tore across the floor. And 20 unnamed residents died in the earthquake that followed, the first wave of a larger disaster folding over the town. But the past was just a warm-up. As the Upside Down bleeds into our world, the stakes have never been higher. Here are the casualties from the beginning of the end. Season 5, Volume 1. While the human body count in the first episode is thankfully low compared to what comes later, there is a death that honestly hit me harder than I expected. I am talking about Jake. Yes, Jake the Snake. I know it's a reptile, but you have to hear me out on this one because it matters. Dustin Henderson has been through the absolute ringer. He lost Eddie Munson in the most traumatic way possible. He is traumatized, and he is trying to find some semblance of normalcy or control in a world that has gone completely off the rails. He rescues the snake, Jake, from the science lab at school. He calls it a field trip. And you can see that this little creature is his new dart, but without the terrifying demodog evolution that eats cats. It is just a pet, a small connection to the natural world that he is trying to save. But then we have Andy. Andy is the new antagonist at Hawkins High, this jock who represents the absolute worst of mundane human cruelty. When Dustin goes to Eddie's grave to clean off that horrific vandalism, hoping for a moment of peace and connection with his fallen friend, he finds pieces of Jake, chopped up, lying on the ground below Eddie's defaced headstone. It is brutal. It is visceral. Moving right along into the heavier action, we have to talk about the military presence because the body count for the US Army in these first 4 episodes is absolutely astronomical. We get that intense sequence involving the supply convoy and Hopper's infiltration. We know Hopper has been doing these crawls into the Upside Down to do recon, which sounds brave until you see it and realize exactly why it is a suicide mission every single time. He infiltrates that supply convoy hiding in the transport truck, and things go south so fast. We are watching the convoy move through the Upside Down. The atmosphere is thick with spores and red lightning, and suddenly a demogorgon just leaps out of the fog. It is chaos. The creature kills 2 soldiers almost immediately upon landing, just tearing through them like they are made of paper. Then it lands on the roof of the transport truck, the very one Hopper is hiding in, and smashes right through the metal cab. The driver of that truck didn't stand a chance. We see the roof cave in, and the driver is killed instantly. It is a terrifying way to go. Then we have the situation at the billboard in the Upside Down. This is where we see Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan and his team trying to secure the area, and they are just completely out of their depth. They stop at Checkpoint H for Hercules, and Sullivan steps out to do recon, which is basically just code for taking a leak against the landscape of hell. One of his soldiers decides to relieve himself near the vine wall. Hopper is hiding behind that billboard with 11, and he sees the soldier. The soldier notices a knife in the vines, which tips him off that they aren't alone. But before he can really process it or raise a proper alarm, Sullivan calls in the Hedgehog. That is that massive sonic cannon device mounted on the Humvee, designed specifically to incapacitate 11. As soon as they turn that sonic cannon toward the wall, 11 starts screaming in agony because those sound waves are her kryptonite. Hopper knows he has to act, and he has to act now or they are both dead. So he goes into full survivalist Rambo mode. He grabs those grenades from his bag, pulls the pins with a grim look of determination, and throws them out from behind the billboard. The explosion is massive. We see the fireball blast the soldiers back, sending bodies flying through the air. It is hard to get an exact head count in the explosion itself because of the chaos and the smoke, but that grenade blast definitely took out a cluster of Sullivan's men. It was a brutal, necessary move to silence that cannon. Hopper shoots and destroys the Hedgehog device right after, and once that device is down, 11 regains her focus. We see her use her powers to take out the remaining soldiers who survived the initial blast, and she does not hesitate. And listen, before we get to the next batch of bodies, do me a favor and obliterate that like button with the same intensity Hopper just used on those grenades. Unlike those soldiers, it'll actually survive the impact. Episode 4 is where the bodies really start piling up in a way that feels like a finale. There is a specific soldier whose neck gets snapped by 11 using her telekinetic powers. She throws him over the tower like a rag doll. It is a shocking moment because we usually see Elle using her powers for defense or restraint. Even though she is struggling with her powers and the dampening effects of the environment, she is still lethal when she needs to be. Then there is the tragic, messy case of the male scientist. This scientist gets accidentally shot to death by Lieutenant Robert Akers and 2 other soldiers with multiple assault rifles. The tragedy is that he was placed in a nearby cabinet to hide him. When Dr. K's soldiers, led by Akers, began firing, they thought it was Hopper behind those doors. They didn't realize it was their poor, unconscious colleague. They lit that cabinet up and the body fell out. Speaking of Lieutenant Robert Akers, the 5th season strongly suggests that he meets his end here as well. Although he survived his initial run-in with 11 and Hopper, which resulted in Elle sifting around in his mind for information, he made the mistake of going back for more. He returned to the lab and alerted Dr. K of their presence, bringing down the heat. However, upon leading a group of soldiers into the lab itself to open fire on Hopper, he is seemingly caught in Hopper's return fire. The show doesn't make it 100% explicitly clear in a close-up whether he lives or dies in that split second, but he goes down hard when Hopper opens fire on all of them and then punches him later, knocking him out. He also doesn't resurface after 11 is left alone in the lab for a long period of time, suggesting that he did indeed die in the crossfire. We also have 2 male soldiers who are shot to death by Hopper with an assault rifle during this escape sequence because, let's face it, Hopper in survival mode is absolutely terrifying. He is a one-man army when he needs to be, and he cuts through those soldiers with precise, lethal efficiency. The Demogorgons in this sequence are also doing an absolute number on the military personnel. The writers really wanted to show us that conventional military might is nothing compared to the Upside Down. We have 1 soldier whose head is crushed by a Demogorgon with its feet. Then there are 2 soldiers slashed to death by a Demogorgon with its claws. These things are razor sharp, and they cut through body armor and flesh like it isn't even there. Another soldier suffers a horrific fate where his back is broken by a Demogorgon after being thrown by it at an armored car. The impact alone is enough to kill him, emphasizing the superhuman strength of these monsters. They are using blunt force trauma that shatters bones. Another soldier is slashed to death in the melee, and then there is one killed in an unspecified manner off-screen, probably dragged into the darkness, and another shredded into pieces by a Demogorgon off-camera. The pieces, however, are likely what's left of him, scattered across the battlefield. Then, if that wasn't enough, you have a group of 10 male soldiers who are slashed to death by 3 Demogorgons working in a pack. It is a slaughter. And to top it all off, we later see a massive group of 41 male soldiers who were slashed to death by 3 Demogorgons off-screen. We don't see the deaths happen live, but their bodies are shown later, piled up or scattered, which really sets the scale of how outmatched the military is against the hive mind. 41 soldiers. That is an entire platoon wiped out by just 3 creatures. It effectively establishes that guns are not the answer here. We also have to talk about the deaths caused by Henry Creel, aka Vecna, because his kills are always more personal, more psychological, and somehow more disturbing than the animalistic violence of the Demogorgons. There are 3 male soldiers killed by Henry in an unspecified manner with his telekinetic powers. He likely just snapped them or stopped their hearts, tossing them aside like toys. Then there is one soldier who gets impaled through the chest by Henry with his arm vines. This is a signature move for him, using the environment of his own body to pierce through his enemies. It is gross and it is fatal. Another soldier gets tossed over a ledge by Henry, falling to his death in the dark depths of the dimension. And then we have the burned soldiers who try to fight fire with fire but fail miserably. One burned soldier is blown up in an explosion caused by Henry with a flamethrower. Henry basically turns their own weapons against them, using his telekinesis to redirect the flames or explode the tanks. 4 others meet the same fate, consumed by the very fire they tried to use to sanitize the Upside Down. 5 more soldiers are blown up by Henry with 2 grenades. He catches the grenades' pins in midair with his mind while they are still on the soldiers' belts and sends the soldiers crashing into the nearby fuel tank, causing it to explode. It is effortless for him. Then there is the debatable death of Lieutenant Colonel Jack Sullivan. This guy has been a thorn in everyone's side for so long. He is burned from an explosion caused by Henry. Sullivan leads the charge as the soldiers attempt to hold back the invaders from the Upside Down, and to his credit, he does hold his own against the raging Demogorgons for a bit. However, he is caught in a blast when Vecna manages to reverse a wall of fire meant for him. The blowback results in the Colonel himself catching on fire and screaming in agony. It is a horrific way to go. It is unclear if he lives or dies right in that second, but considering the show spends the next few moments on Vecna's confrontation with Will and the roaring stops, it is a safe bet that he might not have made it. After all, Dr. K is the show's new human threat now, so logically, Sullivan's narrative purpose might be over. If he is dead, he died screaming, consumed by the arrogance that led him to believe he could control or defeat this power with guns and bombs. Another soldier gets a particularly nasty end when he is stabbed through the back of the head by Henry with his finger vines. It is quick, silent, and brutal. But it isn't just humans dying, and honestly, seeing the monsters go down is the only thing that brings a little satisfaction in all this horror. The monsters take some hits too. We see 3 Demogorgons get their limbs and necks snapped by Will Byers using his telekinetic link. This is a huge moment. It is a character evolution. It shows Will leveling up and using his connection to the hive mind as a weapon against it. He snaps their necks with his mind, turning their own biology against them. It is a death for the monsters, but a rebirth for Will as a dominant character. And now we reach the final stand. No more running, no more hiding. This is the ultimate conclusion. Here is every death from the grand finale, Season 5, Volumes 2 and 3. And now Chapter 5. Shock Jock really opened up on what happened to Kaylee's gang, and honestly, it was way more brutal than I think any of us were expecting. Axel getting that sniper headshot on the orders of Dr. K was genuinely shocking in that flashback. And then we find out that Dottie, Funshine, and Mick were all killed off-screen by those same soldiers. That throat-slitting and double stabbing of the Wolfpack scientist when they think she is dead shows us a Kali we haven't really seen before. Yes, she was always willing to use her powers to hurt people, but there's something so visceral and personal about using a scalpel. She wanted those deaths to hurt, and I think that tells us everything about where her character arc was heading. She also shoots an unnamed male Wolfpack soldier in the head with a pistol, shown in a flashback. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery involves the unnamed pregnant women, at least 6 of them, who died after receiving blood transfusions of Kali's blood because of Dr. K's experiments. Chapter 6, Kamchatka, takes us back to Henry's origin story in the most visceral way possible. We see an unnamed scientist getting struck at least 6 times on the head with a rock by young Henry Creel. The hospital siege is where things really start escalating. Soldiers Wright and King shoot at demodogs as Vecna sends them to kill Max, who is still in her coma. Wright has his head mauled by a demodog. King has his head and body mauled by a demodog. These deaths happen quickly and brutally. But Karen Wheeler getting to blow up 3 of those demodogs with a gas canister is honestly one of the most satisfying moments in the entire season. She hears Robin's call over the hospital intercom, gets out of her hospital bed despite her injuries, and places an oxygen tank in an industrial dryer to absolutely obliterate those monsters. Chapter 7 is essentially a war zone from start to finish. 4 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers get shot to death by Jim Hopper with an assault rifle as they reach the main base. Nancy fires her gun through a hole in the truck roof against Kay and her men, taking out 3 more unnamed Wolfpack soldiers. But Chapter 8 is where everything goes completely off the rails in the best possible way. 6 more unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers get shot to death by Hopper. Then we get the confrontation with Akers, who threatens to kill Kaylee unless Hopper tells him where 11 is. Callie signals Hopper not to tell though, and both of them are willing to die to protect Elle. Before Akers can pull the trigger, Murray pops a grenade and throws it into the rotors of the chopper. 3 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers were blown up by Murray with the C4 explosive, and then 11 arrived, utterly destroys the remaining soldiers. 7 unnamed male Wolfpack soldiers have their necks snapped by 11 using her telekinetic powers. Then she forces Akers to shoot himself in the head, but we discover that the single shot Akers fired went into Callie's stomach. 11 pleads with her to pull through, but Kaylee is at peace with this, and she dies. 11's assault on the massive Mind Flayer is one of the coolest scenes in all of Stranger Things. She leaps into the air, tears a hole in its chest, and yanks Vecna down from his hanging perch. Nancy volunteers as bait during the final battle, firing on the monster as the Mind Flayer corners her, biting through solid rock to get to her. But the rest of the Abyss party comes to the rescue with flamethrowers and Molotov cocktails. Mike even gets to fire off his flare gun. Will tears off Vecna's arm while telling him they are not afraid of him, and 11 finishes the job of impaling him. The Mind Flayer collapses in flames and its heart shrivels up. The creature that has been haunting Hawkins since Season 1 is finally truly dead. But Vecna begins to cough up blood, revealing he is still alive. The party gathers around him to witness his final moment, and Joyce Byers finally takes out her axe. She delivers an all-time banger of a line before cutting Vecna's head off with repeated brutal swings as flashbacks to all the trauma he has caused play. And then there's 11. She slips away back into the Upside Down at the cost of her own life. Mike gets pulled into her mindscape for a tearful goodbye as she thanks him for their time together. The bomb goes off. The Upside Down collapses and everything inside is swept out into the void of space. 11 stands at the Mac Z gate while everyone screams for her in slow motion. And then 11 is gone. The Upside Down is gone. She sacrificed herself to end it all, choosing to stay on the bridge rather than risk Dr. K getting her hands on another child with powers. So what is the final death toll? We have over 100 military personnel killed by Demogorgons, Vecna, and 11 combined. We have Kali and her entire gang massacred by the Wolfpack operation. We have the tragic deaths of at least 6 innocent pregnant women in those horrific experiments. We have Jake the Snake. We have both the Mind Flayer and Vecna finally permanently destroyed after terrorizing Hawkins for years. And we have 11, the girl who started it all and ended it on her own terms. A new intro replaced this line from Vol 1, Deathstock. So, looking at the total picture, the death toll is staggering. And if these first 4 episodes are anything to go by, no one is safe. The graveyard is getting full, and we are only halfway through.